We're going to work on some troubleshooting on our machine. So I have 2 pieces of fabric here that I'm going to sew, and we're going to do some troubleshooting. We're going to do the most frequently encountered problems. So I'm going to just line it up on the 5/8. I do have my needle centered. That's the way I like mine. You'll also see there's a notch in the foot here. That's also telling me it is centered. That's just the way I like sewing. So one of the things that I do like my students to do is when you're starting, never start with your foot on the feed dogs. You always want to make sure you have fabric underneath. And you'll also notice on here you have this ledge here. So you want to make sure your fabric is covering that. You'll notice that my button has turned green. That means I'm now ready to start sewing. My speed is all the way down. And I'm doing just a standard stitch on here. So let's go forward a bit and see if I have any issues with it. One of the things I do like to do, if I have a tail like this, hold it. If you don't hold your tails, so that would be the bobbin and the top thread, if you don't hold them, you can get nesting underneath, and you need to only hold it for, say, the first 2 to 3 stitches, and then you can let go. If you've used your scissors to cut your top and bottom thread, you don't need to hold them. But I've noticed on Facebook, there's a lot of people talking about my thread's always nesting. That's because you have long thread here. Just gently hold it and go. So I do have it slow. Let's just see if I have any issues. Okay, that's good enough. Let's cut. Foot up. So let's take a look at the stitching. It looks like the thread is just one straight line on the top. Let's look at the bottom. The bottom doesn't look too bad. Now I am using a pre-wound bobbin, so that's a thinner thread in the bottom and a 50 weight, so an 80 weight on the bottom and a 50 weight on the top, which actually gives you a better stitch. But the stitching here does not look very good. I can actually feel that it's raised. There's bumps on the top there. So it looks like my bobbin thread is coming up to the top. So let's go over to the machine and see what my machine is set at. So my machine is still in metric. You'll notice that my tension is actually a 3 here. So I've loosened the tension up top here. So this is why my top thread is laying on top here. So the default tension on this machine is a 4. So I'm going to go ahead and change it. The tension right here. I'm going down. Let's go up to 4. It goes up. So you can really fine tune your tension on the brothers. Do okay. Let's give that a try and see how that stitches. So I'm just going to stitch to the left of my first stitching. Line it up properly. Foot down. And let's go ahead. So a good thing to do is that once you get your machine set up the way you like, you want to write down what your tension is, what your stitch length is, the needle, and the thread that you've used. And you keep that as a reference and put that in your sewing book or your manual so you'll always know. Let's see if I can feel. No, I can't feel. As here, I can feel the bobbin stitches coming up. This feels much better. Let's go on the bottom. Now the bobbin's looking very fine there. I like going up by whole numbers. And let's see how that stitches out. That's looking much better. So I made that a little tighter. Let's look at the back. You see my top thread's kind of getting caught in there. I didn't hold it. The bottom's looking okay. Still looks pretty loose there, doesn't it? So what could possibly be wrong? So I have a checklist that I always go through. First is my needle. I put a brand new needle in there. As you saw me, I put a brand new 8012 in it, so I know it's not my needle. Am I using the proper weight of thread? I'm using a 50 weight cotton from Wonderfil. It's called Confetti. Is it properly threaded on my machine? Well, you never know, so let's just take it out. So we're going to cut the thread. You always cut the thread, never pull it out this way. Cut the thread, and then you can pull it out this way. So pretend you're flossing it, and let's rethread it. 1, let's go around 2, 3, 4. Remember that little door up here is open. Down to here. 4, around the hook above the needle. Now we want to put it in this little notch around to 7. Let's cut our thread, tug, and gently thread it. So remember that if it doesn't work, your needle may not be in the right position. Needle down, needle up, then try to thread it. Okay. So we've rethreaded the machine. Let's give that a try. I'm just going to move down here now. I'm going to just speed up the machine a little. So when you're troubleshooting your machine, you want to do one thing, test it. Do one thing, test it. Don't do 3 things and then test it, because you'll never know which one of those corrected the problem. So let's sew this. It's okay, but you know what? You should be able to see stitch definition on there. Okay, so needle is fine. We've rethreaded our machine. We know we have okay thread. Let's check the bobbin. So we're going to pop open the bobbin door. Let's pull this out. Oh, and I can tell my bobbin is not seated properly. Goes around here, down there. Cut this thread. So let's start up here. So now keep in mind, I kind of have some tails here, right? Let's put our thing down. I want to hold my top thread so I don't get nesting. Ooh, look at that. Look how nice that was. Beautiful. Let's look at the back. A little, that was the tail of what I cut off. That looks beautiful. So what I did here is I actually changed the weight of my bobbin. That was my 80 weight, and I put the 50 weight in there. So it's a marriage of your bobbin, your needle, and your thread, and the tension. So one of the other things I want to talk about is sometimes your thread, when you go to start, it'll get down in that hole. And that is actually fixed by getting a single stitch hole plate. I actually got one for mine because I've been making a lot of masks lately. And instead of the thread and the fabric getting stuck inside where the needle goes in, with a single hole, it just feeds it properly. So if you're doing a lot of piecing, quilters have single stitch holes. It does wonders for piecing. So that could be your problem too. That is puckering down in here. Nesting, as I've already said, try to hold your top thread. And if you have a long bobbin, you're going to hold both or just the one. You will not get the nesting. If you had threads coming up to the top, that's going to be telling you that there's something wrong. And it's usually the opposite of where the problem is. So if it's showing on the top, it must be something on the bottom. If you're seeing problems on the bottom, it's something on the top. It's always the reverse. Most of our machines, the problems are almost always with the top. It could be bad thread. If you're using cotton thread that you've had for 20 years, you should buy new stuff. We live in a very, very dry climate, and the dry climate will actually take any moisture out of the cotton thread. If you really love that thread, you can buy Sewer's Aid that we sell here. It's silicone, and you just run it up and down, and it provides some moisture for the thread. If your thread is breaking, it could be old as well. Put the Sewer's Aid on it, and it's wonderful. I use it on my long arm. It's wonderful for doing that. So typically I see people getting nesting. The tension on the top is out, or this thread is too old and it just keeps snapping. One of the other problems I see is that people who are using a 50 weight thread up top, and they have a really, really small needle in here. And the eye of the needle is actually designed for a silk thread, which is very fine, and they cannot thread the needle. Or the automatic needle threader will not work because the thread is so thick. It's like you're trying to stick a square peg into a round hole, and it just will not work. If you ever have any questions about what proper thread to buy, when you come in here to buy it, the ladies out front will ask you what you're using it for. Say piecing for a quilt. They'll recommend a 50 or a 60 weight, and then ask for what the appropriate needle for that, and that's usually 80 universal.